and welcome to today's Tiger webinar. I'm Lydia Palmer from RIT's Division of Development and Alumni Relations, and I am your moderator for today's webinar. We're happy to have you join us today, and we hope that you and our entire Tiger family are well. As we all continue to weather this new working environment, we want you to know that the RIT Office of Alumni Relations is available to help all RIT alumni with a variety of needs, including new virtual content, learning opportunities, and networking and career assistance through the new normal of pandemic realities. We especially encourage everyone to connect to the RIT Alumni Association social media channels, including Facebook, LinkedIn, and Twitter, where you will find up-to-date communications and opportunities to connect to other Tiger alumni in your region and your industry. Those links are found in the chat box, and the chat box can be opened by clicking on the chat tab at the right of your webinar window. Many in the RIT family have asked how they can help our students and the university as we respond to the pandemic, and we are incredibly grateful for those offers. There are two ways you can help. First, our new graduates and current students are seeking positions for full-time careers and co-ops. Many of these positions have been delayed or canceled entirely. If your company is hiring or you would consider adding a co-op post, please contact Chris Steeler at RIT's Career Services Office and allow her to post that position in our system. In addition, there is now an unprecedented need for financial aid scholarships for current and incoming Tiger students. If you are able, please make a gift at the link in the chat box, and we thank you very much. We also want to let our alumni know that an online presidential town hall will be held on June 24th at 2 p.m. This is an opportunity to hear directly from Dr. Munson about RIT's response to the COVID-19 crisis and how we are working to keep the entire RIT family safe and our students moving forward in the coming months. Watch your email for registration. We want to ensure that everyone is ready and familiar with the presentation tools. If you are joining from a remote location and are currently signed into your company's VPN, we encourage you to close that channel during the webinar to increase the quality of the transmission. The webinar platform is secure without VPN. All attendees have joined in mute mode. However, your questions can be entered in the chat box at any time throughout the discussion. We will make every effort to address all your comments and questions throughout the webinar. You're joining the event using broadcast audio, and if you wish to dial in by phone, dial-in information is provided in the chat box. Live captioning is also being provided, and you can find the link to access that in the chat box as well. This webinar will be recorded and made available, complete with captions, in approximately 1 week following today's event. All participants will receive an email with the link to the recording. If you have any technical questions, please go ahead and type those into the chat box as well, and we'll do our best to get you the appropriate answers. And now on to our webinar, COVID-19, Transforming the Way We Look at Online. We are pleased to welcome two-time alumna Thérèse Hannigan. Thérèse is the director of RIT Online, where she creates and executes the strategy to broaden RIT's global reach in online learning, including demand-based program design and development. In this role, she is instrumental in forging strategic partnerships between the key external organizations and the university to reduce barriers to degrees, offer flexibility and accessible pathways for non-traditional students, and leverage industry education opportunities, all in an effort to sustainably strengthen RIT. Thérèse is also a tenured associate professor specializing in design and user experience across a broad spectrum of media and emerging digital technologies. In addition, she was the founder, president, and creative director at dWaiter for over 13 years. dWaiter is an award-winning interactive agency that specializes in building innovative, results-oriented web and mobile solutions. Thérèse, thank you for joining us today, and our audience is all yours.
Thank you, Lydia, and good afternoon, everyone, or good morning, depending on where you are. I'm so happy that you're taking some time out of your day to have a discussion about the way online has transformed over recent months. As Lydia mentioned with my background, my current role, I'm serving as director of RIT Online, but I'm really pulling from my experience as an RIT student, a former business owner, a faculty member, and user experience designer. That has really helped working with a strong group of talented people across the university to come up with new ways to deliver online education to the world. And we'll get into some of that as we move forward, but let's jump right in. And as you go, if you have questions, please, I would like this to be a discussion. So if you enter something in the chat, I'd love to hear from you. And we will also be collecting any information. So even if we don't get to it during the webinar, your opinions, your ideas are very important to us. So please share as much as you like. So let's go back to March 11th. RIT announced there will be no in-person classes for the remainder of the semester. On the 12th, the next day, RIT confirmed that beginning March 23rd, all coursework will move to alternative delivery methods, including online. On March 15th, RIT communicated that it is critical that all students be able to fulfill their academic requirements remotely. On March 23rd, over 1,300 instructors pivoted to deliver over 3,600 face-to-face courses remotely. That is a huge effort. Now, I want to take you back to 2 weeks earlier than that. So we started our messaging on March 11th, but 2 weeks earlier, I just want to give you some context as to what online learning looked like at RIT prior to COVID. So there were 3 modes of delivery at RIT that were mainly used. In person, the face-to-face traditional approach on campus that many of you may be familiar with. There's online, which you're usually studying remotely, and then blended. So you can imagine at this point in time, the majority of the use was predominantly in person. So that was the delivery mode most faculty used. Online would probably come into a far second, and then third is blended. And when it comes to blended, you know, there's a lot of research out there that blended is a great way to deliver really strong learning outcomes for students, but it just wasn't something that was widely embraced. So I have a question for you. What is your perception of online learning? You know, do you believe that online instruction provides the same value and effectiveness as face-to-face instruction? And again, please go ahead and add any answers you have to these questions or any questions you have yourself as we go through. So I'm just curious.
Go ahead. I'm sorry, yep. Thérèse, just everyone can please enter your thoughts on your perception of online learning right in the chat box, and we'll continue that discussion.
And again, it could be positive, negative, just curious about your thoughts and any experiences you may have had with online learning. So many of you may not know, but RIT has actually been delivering distance education for over 40 years. Now on the left-hand side, you can see it looked a lot differently through cable access, VHS tapes, DVDs, CDs. So it looked a lot differently those many years ago, but we were really pioneering back then, thinking about how do you get education to people who can't come to campus. And then as you'll see on the right side of the screen, you start to see that shift over to a learning management system. And if you're familiar or have been through RIT in recent years, my courses should ring a bell. And so as time went on, and we still continued to engage in online learning, the perception of it wasn't, well, unanimous across the board that you could receive the same quality of education through online delivery that you could face-to-face. So one of the things that we wanted to do is to actually see what we could do online in a safe space. So back in 2015, RIT joined edX. If you're not familiar with edX.org, it is a massive open online course provider. This allowed us to experiment with courses, delivery, technology in a way that was safe, meaning we weren't jumping into one of our credit-bearing degree programs and experimenting in a space where people are already used to a certain type of delivery. We took lessons learned in that space and figured we would apply them to those programs.
So Thérèse, before you continue, we've got a couple of comments on perceptions and impressions of online learning. We have one attendee who said she took a blended course at RIT in communications and she loved it. And she's now working in ed tech, so she's on the other side supporting students and teachers as they're working remotely. So I'm sure that was a helpful course for her. Lorraine says she really missed being face-to-face with her students after the abrupt changes. So there's a question about personalizing, being more connected to the people who are involved. Jane also says you don't get the interaction with students with online learning that you do in the course in the classroom. Kelly says she's sitting in a room by herself and listening, and that's kind of her online experience. And then probably this is pretty clear. It depends on the subject. I've never liked taking online classes when I was completely in the MBA program, but I do enjoy short 1 hour webinars. I think someone earlier also said that it's not really great for science courses because you have lab expectations and they're not clear on how that would work. And lastly, we're amazed at how well our sudden change to all online instruction went at the photo and media program in Northern Virginia Community College's Alexandria campus. So we have another perspective from higher ed, but we're concerned, it goes on to say, about the often negative perception potential students may have about online versus in-person learning. And I will just myself add to that. I think that there is still a question about how much an online course or online programs are accepted as a professionally focused credential. So that's kind of the view from your audience.
Well, you mentioned Lorraine Hems, and I have to say that as an alum, actually 2 courses that I never got to take while I was there was Beers of the World and Wines of the World. So I know that Lorraine Hems has experience with Wines of the World, and I would love to take her class online. So I think that's another piece of the puzzle, that we look to online as an opportunity to engage others that we wouldn't, again, normally be able to have come back to campus. So I think that, a lot of the opportunities that present themselves will be more welcome based on what has recently happened through this pivot. A lot of faculty were adverse to online, and it may have been just because it was unfamiliar. For whatever reason, I think the main lesson learned is working with an instructional designer is extremely important. A well-designed course, whether it's face-to-face or online, it comes down to the design and the preparation, like some folks were saying about science and math. Really thinking about what pieces need to be online and something that a student can actually go through the material and actually, rewind, play it again for concepts they don't understand as much. And then perhaps when you're going to have an engaging opportunity, thinking about how the technology could help enhance that rather than try to replace what happens in a classroom. How can you make it better? And we'll get into that a little bit as we talk a little bit about the edX work that we've been doing. But in 2020, you'll see RIT Online becomes a standalone unit. We were within the Innovative Learning Institute, but we have been separated from that area to focus solely online. And this happened right before COVID hit. So RIT Online right now, you can see sort of what our portfolio looks like. It is a mix of traditional credit-bearing online programs. When I say traditional, your 3-credit courses, the degree that you receive is the same that you would on campus. It's just delivered in a different mode. These students don't physically come to campus. They study fully online. And then there's also the other side that I mentioned before with edX, which you'll see RITX show up a lot. Basically, they have you take the university name and add an X on the end of it. And these are non-credit courses. So these are those ones that I mentioned that we could experiment with. But again, they are massive open online courses. So at one point in one of our cybersecurity courses, we had 56,000 students in it. So you're probably thinking to yourself, how in God's name do you go from 20 in a class in the traditional sense to something like that with a lot of good instructional design, really planning that experience. So our RIT Online portfolio today, and this would be the credit-bearing side, it looks more like graduate level focus, as you'll notice, and that was deliberate. If you went, again, years back, not just months back, RIT really felt that doing graduate programs online would be acceptable, but they weren't totally convinced that doing undergraduate degrees would be appropriate. And a lot of that really hinged on the fact that they felt that part of the undergraduate experience is being on campus, interacting with your fellow students, with your faculty, with staff. And so you'll see that the majority of our programs right now are focused at that graduate level. The other thing that happens too is folks finishing their undergraduate degree may have wanted to take some other courses in other disciplines, but maybe didn't have the time. Adding that graduate certificate to an existing undergraduate degree is a nice complement and to help you through your career. But painting the picture of what it looked like, again, 2 weeks before, the number of online courses that we had was 572. So that means it's an online course delivered either for a fully online program or a campus program that decided to deliver a course online for the flexibility that it provides. The online class sections, so if you remember your course sections from way back when, it's about 877. And one thing I want to notice right here is faculty teaching online, 444. If you remember at the beginning of this presentation, over 1,300 faculty pivoted to online. So that's how many were, in the traditional sense, in the online space versus what was the reaction from COVID. So the RIT Online Portfolio is, again, focused a lot on working professionals, people who have completed most likely a campus undergraduate degree and now are looking for online education to supplement what they've already done. A lot of times, as you can see, these are sort of look like cards. A lot of people will look to try before you buy, if you will. Take a single online course to see if it's right for them because their undergraduate degree may have been campus-based. And this allows them to go into individual subject matter. Maybe you now own a business and you need to read a spreadsheet and you don't know how. Taking an online course is a great way to see if it's right for you, and then you can continue to add on from there. Now, flipping back to RITX, so these enrollment numbers look a lot different. If you remember, the other enrollments were like 13,000. Now we're talking 1,400,066. So when you see this, it might seem a little daunting, but as you get down to the bottom number, which is 36,000, those are verified enrollments. So on this big open platform, it allows us to reach students globally. And on the edX platform, you can take a course for free, or you can pay, and that is the verified enrollment, so that if you do successfully complete that course, you get a certificate of completion for that knowledge. A lot of people are putting it on their LinkedIn profiles. A lot of employers are starting to recognize these. And with these enrollments, they are taking a little bit of RIT content and faculty and getting exposed to it. And so some ways we've actually used it as a marketing effort because, again, there's so many people who never studied online. The fact that they could do it for free to test it out is a nice way to get started. And just to give you some demographics, as an alum, I love this slide just because it's amazing to see that we've reached over 200, well, depends on how you number countries, but these are countries and regions. Basically, we get a dashboard from edX that allows us to see where all our learners are from in each course and as a whole. So from all over the world. So our brand has reached all of those people throughout the globe. The median learning age is 32, but I'll tell you, when we had our game design series up, it was a little lower than that. And we've had people from 8 to 80 years old take the courses, but that would be the median learner age that we see going through. The learner gender, and this has to do a lot with the type, like the subject matter that is put out, but it's still predominantly male. And then the learner level that we see on edX is usually folks who have a bachelor's degree. So again, just a great way to see RIT putting a reach out into the world, aside from all of those great lessons that we learned that help inform what we do after COVID, how we do create online experiences that are highly engaging. And I go back to the instructional design component. to teach that many people versus 20 in a classroom, you have to put a lot of months of work into designing that course. All the assessments are more automated. There's a lot of discussion forums and things that need to be moderated. It's a whole different type of approach to do something at scale like this versus something that's more of a traditional RIT section.
So Thérèse, I'll share with you a comment from one of our colleagues at the Osher Lifelong Learning Institute. She said that both members and instructors who are all over age 50 have pivoted pretty nicely to online classes, but she does say that there was a lot of training necessary for her and for the staff. But now they're continuing classes via Zoom, even when people are able to go back into the classroom. So there's definitely I prefer to stay at home and not do the travel and not go into the classroom versus people who prefer to be in a classroom environment.
And one of the things that edX has done that is nice that I think we can look into developing more resources for is really welcoming you to online courses. On our RIT online website, we actually have is online learning right for you. And if you click on that, you can go through an assessment. And it really talks about your learning habits. You get to know a little bit more about how you learn and whether it's an effective tool for you. It talks about planning on your calendar. So there are a lot of aspects to online learning that, I think that as you jump in, that's one way to do it, but having a little bit of an understanding of how you like to learn and how you can even set up in many places the space that you're in. You can set it up so that it'll work best for you. I included this slide because I think the visual is very compelling. As we think about these global learners and where they are, one of the things that one of our professors does, Jonathan Wiseman, he actually has them in a discussion forum, ask them why they came here. Why are you taking this course and where are you from, and put a pin on the map. So this doesn't even show all of the learners. These are the ones who self-reported and actually said where they were. You'll notice some are out in the middle of the water, but in most cases, we can see actually where our learners are coming from. And I think that the enrichment that brings to the course, a lot of people, again, might say online, not really for me. Well, for some disciplines, I would imagine if you can pull your students and they are experiencing life in so many different ways. I'll use cybersecurity as an example. The students that are in those courses and the places they work, they share, their pain points and what they face versus some other countries. The learning experience just gets that much better because you have all of this rich dialogue that goes on inside the course. So MicroMasters programs. I wanted to highlight this given our audience today, because this is one of the things, again, as an alum, makes me very proud. RIT was one of the first programs that work with MIT. You can see we got a logo nice and big next to MIT, but to work with some other universities to develop a pathway to credit program. So we saw through professional certificate programs that were on the edX platform that a lot of people were actually taking these courses, getting a certificate of completion, and getting either a job promotion or they were shifting a career. And we were very surprised by that. So as time went on, thinking about the opportunity for people to have a affordable, flexible pathway to a degree, that is what this MicroMasters was sort of born out of. And so we developed 3 MicroMasters. You can see them highlighted in those orange squares. One is cybersecurity, another is project management, and another is design thinking. So with these MicroMasters, if you haven't heard of these before, it's a series of career-focused, master's level online offerings. But remember, there's no credit associated on the edX platform itself. So RIT faculty develop the content. We, as a unit, actually help them build and put it in the platform, doing all their video, doing the instructional design, developing the assessments. It's really a high-touch kind of experience of our production team and the faculty working together. But they put together these offerings at the master's level, knowing that it will become a pathway to credit at RIT. So, for example, I'll use cybersecurity again. It was cybersecurity faculty that developed the content. So they knew if students successfully completed those offerings, that they would be a good candidate for our RIT degree program. So upon successful completion of the RITX MicroMasters program, learners are prepared to advance in the workforce. So just the MicroMasters alone, think of that as a credential, not accredited, but a credential, or build on their work by applying for a master's degree. So admitted students are awarded usually 9 credits for their MicroMasters program certificate toward select master's programs at RIT. So again, they have to be admitted. There's still an admissions process, but if they successfully completed that program, they will be awarded 9 credits on the way in. So just to give you an idea, the cost of a MicroMasters program is typically $1,200. To do those 9 credits online in most programs is about $12,000. It's a huge saving. And these courses on edX are offered year-round, 24/7, and they've been built, again, to be a massive open online course, so we can have people go through at an accelerated pace if they want, and it gives them multiple entry points rather than just the traditional fall to enter a degree program. So it works for their lifestyle. The other thing that's nice too, if you're a working professional, you've got a family, you've got other obligations, it's a nice way to baby step your way into maybe considering that more formal degree program. Here are some of the success stories. Again, I know this type is very small. You will get this deck later, and I can always share these stories with you, but there are just so many. I've only highlighted a couple. But what I wanted to talk about with you today is the fact that when we started this out, we thought, oh, great, pathway to credit, MicroMasters, this is terrific. Affordable way for our alums if they want to pursue a master's degree. And we started seeing a shift where the MicroMasters credential by itself was a big deal. So students from around the world are telling us about these great jobs they got just from completing the MicroMasters. And so one of the things that we make sure we do is we have access to burning glass technologies. They have dashboards that allow us to see real-time data. A lot of it is based on the Bureau of Labor Statistics. So looking at cybersecurity alone, you may have had to have a master's degree 2 years ago to get certain jobs. We checked it 60 days ago to 30 days ago. Now it's down to a bachelor's, in some cases, something like this MicroMasters. So part of what we're going to see, I think, is the change of online learning. How is online used to help people retool, to reskill? Maybe they're out of work right now and need an affordable pathway to get back to work. So a question I have for you is, are you looking for new credentials? And if so, what forms are you considering? Master's, certificate, another type of professional type of education opportunity? Some of the things that I know I think about is, if I hadn't got my master's right after my undergrad, I don't think I would have gone back. I don't know that I would have taken the time, but everything's changed now. Everything's so much more accessible. I like the fact that we can pay a different price to learn something that's of value to us, but maybe we don't need a whole degree in it. So as we look at these labor insights, we're trying to understand, what are the pain points of industry? Where's the demand? What are students looking for? And how do we connect those two and put it at a price point that makes sense for the type of learning experience that it is?
Yeah, and if anyone does have some thoughts on credentials, or the course that you always wanted to take, or something that you find is a hurdle for you in your career, go ahead and enter that into the chat box, and we'll continue the discussion and look at what people are saying are their areas of interest. I know one that I personally have experienced is the ongoing need for technological things, everything from computer software programs that you need to use that don't really require a 3-hour or 6-hour set of courses to learn. And because they change so rapidly, it just seems to work so much better to do that kind of thing online. And the other thing that I we've noticed is that a lot of not just credentialed education, but just training in general seems to have moved online. We're moving into a new database and digital marketing platform in our office, and all of the training is done online, just like an online course. There's a video module you watch, and then there's assessments afterward, and that goes on through the whole training. They don't really do much of anything for a client in person anymore.
And we'll bounce around a little bit with the content here in the term online. So, for years I've been working obviously with online. RIT's been doing it for over 40. But the term online means different things. And I feel like we hear that word over and over again right now on the news, any show you watch, any podcast you listen to, online, online, online. Well, in the case of the pivot that happened in the spring, that was shifting to remote methods of learning, like alternative modes. Traditional online course takes 4 to 6 months to build, and it has got to be very well designed. And like some of the things that someone mentioned in the chat about, some things are okay to be recorded and actually may be better. Things that don't change, that are evergreen. I mean, I like the idea of the fact that you could learn something before you went into the lab and started doing some hands-on work. So I think we can continue the conversation while I've gone through what online learning was at RIT, thinking about what is it going to transform into. So a lot of the stuff that we're talking about today isn't new for RIT, but the culture shift and the acceptance of it and the realization of how creative you can be to enhance your courses with it, I think are going to provide a lot of different opportunities. For me personally, like the idea of even edutainment, I have done masterclass. I can't cook, but I watch Gordon Ramsay do it, and I've learned a lot from, wouldn't have been able to take a course with Diane von Furstenberg otherwise. So I think too, the types of learning, the lifelong learning versus the credit bearing towards a degree learning versus enhancing your job skills and careers. There's that side of it, but also the online components that will help make all modes of delivery maybe even more successful. So looking forward, but going back to this shift. So back on March 6th, that's when the provost asked faculty to prepare for the potential of finishing the semester using alternative course delivery modes. And then on March 23rd, that's where you had that huge pivot of the 1,300 instructors. Again, that term online's be used everywhere, but again, we talk about the need for good design. We must applaud our faculty and staff and students for working together through this transition. It was a lot of hard work for a lot of people. Support staff, and I want to give a shout out to the Innovative Learning Institute. They work closely with faculty to make that pivot quickly to remote modes of instruction. They developed online guides, they ramped up consultation services and workshops. I mean, it was a collaborative, beautiful thing to watch, given the situation. And I think that what's going to come out of it on the other side is going to be extremely positive. We're taking all of the feedback that the students give us, because we are soliciting their input. What was their spring like? What was their summer like? Going into fall, that helps inform staff to work with faculty on how best to design what those experiences look like moving forward. So right now, RIT faculty are planning and developing their courses for a future with flexible modes of delivery in mind. So whether they're teaching face-to-face, remotely, or a strategic combination of the two in the coming semester, they'll be ready to respond accordingly and provide truly engaging learning experiences. So getting back to the topic of this chat, this discussion, is transforming the way we look at it online. The COVID crisis changed the way educators think about the delivery of higher education. You can look at a lot of news articles. Everyone's sort of experiencing this all at the same time. Some are getting through it a little easier than others. But that forced shift to those alternative modes of delivery, I think, and this is only my opinion, will impact the value of all delivery modes. I think about all the courses that I've taught in the past. I've had groups of students, some from the Golisano College of Computing and Information Sciences, some from the College of Art and Design, all coming into a course that had no prerequisites, but yet was demanding a lot of knowledge that should have been accumulated over time. Had I been able to use online to help people understand, and those who needed it at their own pace, some of the software applications and things before they came to lab, that would have allowed our time together to be really, truly engaging, focusing on the application of what they had learned online. A lot of, when people talk about online learning, it's like, well, how do you teach glass blowing? Well, what you could do is probably prepare for being in that space, whether it be safety, whether it be principles. Again, that evergreen content, we can create online instances of that content and blend it with something else. I feel that that blended delivery mode affords the opportunity for extraordinary experiential learning between students and faculty, but I don't think it's a one-size-fits-all. And as someone mentioned earlier, it really depends on the type of content we're using and what you're actually having to communicate. The ability to have that proportion of online to face-to-face, I think, is a wonderful thing. And working with instructional designers to really strategically design that experience, I think the opportunities are going to be just exploding out of this. I think of cybersecurity, going back to that MicroMasters we talked about. There are a lot of companies that have called in or emailed. They were interested in both cybersecurity and project management predominantly through this COVID period. They had 25 to 30 employees that, I need my staff to understand these concepts more. Having that type of content up on edX, where it's 24/7 offered year round at an affordable price, was very attractive to them. So as we think about the opportunities that RIT can share affordable, flexible learning opportunities throughout the world, that's a wonderful thing. But also, I just think about on our campus. As we work on our programs and our courses within a program, sometimes there's this little siloed effect. But yet we all have content that we could use from each other. So if I'm in cybersecurity and say I'm a student that's doing extremely well, but the minute I get in front of someone to present something, I struggle. Well, a public speaking course would be great. So as we start to create some of these chunks of online content, I think that we can start to see some cross-pollination, if you will, to really strengthen all of our programs by sharing some of that content. I also think of the example as you go from one course to the next, the ones that are sequential, there's some concepts we all just struggle with. And if you can get into that next course, but go back to 101 and see that piece, get a refresher, get a reminder, and then move back, what a great thing that would be. So I see RIT having the opportunity to use online in many different ways. But what I see as one of the biggest changes is just the culture change. These faculty have gotten so creative and innovative with their use of technology. In some cases, the lack of technology. They took what they had with Zoom and they did something really special with it. One of the faculty members told me about how he was really worried about having a critique or working group session in Zoom. What he ended up doing was actually not mimicking what he'd do in a studio, but he had all the students live in Zoom and they could actually witness him engaging with students one at a time. He said by the end of spring semester, the quality of work had improved drastically. And what he thinks it's from is actually the students were able to hear every conversation. So if they witnessed a design and they saw something going wrong, they could learn from everyone else's successes as well as mistakes in order to, to improve their own work. So I do think that because our faculty are getting creative and comfortable with the technology, we're going to see great things coming forward. But question for you as alums, and I know we have more than just the audience, but do you believe the quality of learning outcomes will be as good in this new environment as you experienced during your educational journey?
Yeah, so if you have an answer to that question, go ahead and add it into the chat box. We did have one comment from Marjorie talking about the delivery method, and she says that she thinks recorded is better than live because it gives you the chance to pause, go back over material, stop and view other material while you're going through the course, and then continue with the lecture. And I've found that to be the case too. Luann asks, have there been any observations on how well students with learning challenges do with remote learning? So auditory learners, et cetera.
Well, I had the opportunity to work with several units across RIT, and this was just preparing, it was all hands on deck. We all jumped in to help however we could. And just as there were resources developed for faculty who are going to be delivering through alternative modes, part of that also was the student side. And to your question, how were folks going to handle this adjustment? I mean, if you think about it, it's not just, oh, I'm switching to learning remotely. There was a crisis going on. So from an emotional standpoint, there were so many different pieces of support that needed to be in place for that transition. And from the feedback that I've seen, it seems like things went well, but that was with a lot of planning and preparation. So if you do want to reach out to me, I'm going to give you my email address at the end of this. I can connect you with some of the folks who did the hard work on that, and maybe they can provide you with a little bit more information about that experience.
Okay, and again, if you have thoughts on what you see in the quality of the learning outcomes, go ahead and enter those. I think one of the things that's an interesting parallel, and I mentioned the question of whether the credentials are as readily accepted in a professional environment. I think the corresponding shift in work environments to this online world may have changed that cultural perception as well. Just like you had people who were skeptical about the quality of online learning, many of those same people were skeptical about the ability of people to work in a remote environment without their manager constantly, interfacing with them and giving them direction and guidance. And I think that's a question that's going to be raised as we get ready to go back to our other work environments, that a lot of people will say, hey, listen, it worked. There's really no reason for us to all be sitting in the same group office, frankly, sharing our germs. We can work remotely just as effectively as we do sitting together in a singular building. So I think those two things will work hand in hand. Kelly's got a question. She says she's curious about how faculty manage the time change with students remoting in from other regions of the world. Do they do separate sessions, or is it all recorded and the population goes back and gets it later? Or do they all participate at midnight?
That's a great question. And going into this, we may have had a particular opinion about it, but again, that had to do with online learning. So traditionally, online, fully online, meaning you don't physically come to campus, that would probably be either synchronous or asynchronous. When it came to synchronous, if someone's studying from across the globe and can't make your lecture on time, you don't want to punish a student who can't be there. So sometimes introducing the opportunity of the synchronous being office hours or something else where there's still that opportunity to engage live, but it's, again, strategically designed. So we always have to be mindful, and especially on edX, of where learners are and make accommodations right up front and planning for that, and also managing expectations of that so that they can understand what type of experience they will have. I'm glad this was brought up because it makes me think about the work we're doing right now. We have a lot of international students who will not be able to make it here in the fall, but would like to continue their education. So their experience will be fully online, and our staff is working with faculty from those programs. And again, another great thing coming out of this is that, we're having the faculty introduce themselves to these students now, starting now this summer, so that they can actually see little snippets of the course experiences that they're designing for them. So again, that hesitation of someone who might be wondering, well, what is online learning like? giving them an understanding of how that might look in the fall. And really, students want the faculty first and foremost. They want to engage with the faculty. They want their knowledge. So it's our job to really think about how to help the faculty get their message and their knowledge and impart it through these, tools and technologies. I feel like the spring taught us a lot. The summer taught us even more. Moving into fall, I think we're going to see an extraordinary opportunity of flexible modes of delivery and people being able to take this into the next spring and the next fall. I think it will only make faculty's delivery better and stronger and more sustainable. And, someone also mentioned earlier about evergreen. And I think that's part of it too, is instead of just making recordings of everything, what things like a color theory or history of something, the things that don't change, you can kind of put that content into a video that can be reused, but the things that do change, keep them shorter so that it's easy to update. And I think that as we think about faculty who may traditionally teach both online and on campus, they can use a similar course shell and actually deliver to both audiences. They can just spend more time engaging because they've developed that content so that they know that they've given the students what they need when they're studying remotely, and then engaging when it's a little bit more synchronous.
Great. We have one question that hits on the digital divide. How did we attempt to address the possibility that we had students who did not have internet access at home? And I think there's a corollary to that, which is that so many of our highly technologically based programs, some of our photo science programs and others, the students are dependent on the equipment that is available on campus. How are we attempting to address that as well?
And there was a website that went up very quickly, early March. If you go to rit.edu, there's a very large yellow banner that says coronavirus website. If you go there, that's where a lot of people were really walking through the situation that they might be in. Do they have internet access? Do they have the right technology? Giving them the ability to reach out to RIT and say, hey, I've got some issues. So that is not our area of domain, if you will, but what I understand is that there, by the college and by certain units across the campus, they were making sure that students had access and made sure that they got access. And again, not a one-size-fits-all solution. Some folks had different issues than others. I can speak to the edX side of things. When we actually develop courses for that platform, in many countries that we're sharing our coursework with, they have a mobile device and that's it. So they're taking the entire course on their phone. So thinking about what they have access to, what kind of internet access, are there any export issues? All of those things have to go into the original design of the course. And that fast pivot, we did it through soliciting, obviously, feedback from students, but moving forward, it's really designing with purpose and getting that information ahead of time so that we understand what we're dealing with. And on the edX side with those mobile devices, one of those success stories that you saw earlier, one of the gentlemen talked about the fact that he had just made a move across the country, had a brand new baby, wife, and a job, and he did a lot of his schoolwork on the phone. So again, I think that managing expectations as students go into these courses to know what will be needed is extremely important, and faculty are aware of that moving into the fall.
And I think maybe a corollary to that I've always wondered, and I think of Jonathan Wiseman, who's actually done some webinars for us as well, and some of his students will join in on that. How do they address language barrier? If you're on a MOOC and you've got students from 50 countries and speaking 40 different languages, how do they approach that in the educational design?
Well, for us with edX, we obviously have a disclaimer right up front that this will be taught in English. So whatever language is on the edX platform, it's clear. Obviously, working through that, you still have things that you can do to make it a better experience if someone's, if English is someone's second language. And obviously thinking about idioms, certain cultural references that may not make sense. For example, we named one of our professional certificates soft skills, and I thought, what does that translate to? Like, that's more of a, they're power skills, but yet a lot of times people refer them to as soft. So we've gone ahead and adjusted what that is. But the instructional design team is working with the faculty to make sure that in any lectures or any materials that are put forward, that has gone through that lens. And with transcripts and providing a glossary of terms, and make sure that any FAQs, so if someone says, I'm really struggling to understand this concept, I think it has to do with my language, that FAQ, when we answer that question, that informs an entire documentation of frequently asked questions, and it allows us to build a better course, but also gives learners a place to go where people may have asked similar questions, like if they're too shy to reach out and ask the question themselves, they have a place to go to do a little bit more intel on their own. And you mentioned Jonathan Wiseman. That gentleman, he teaches many of our cybersecurity courses on edX. He has engaged over 5,000 learners on LinkedIn. So this is him personally, outside of the course, going in and sharing information, answering student questions. I mean, thousands of them. He is just an extraordinary knowledge expert, but also just his true compassion for learning and education comes through. So I think that's part of this piece in the online space, is that faculty member and putting them in a place that they will be successful, that their skill sets and their strengths shine. And I think that is an example where Jonathan Wiseman really, he shined in that edX space with 56,000 students in his first course, which again has to, you have to have that design piece. You don't just send a faculty member out there into that world. We had a whole team monitoring discussion forums for abuse, making sure any questions that came up were raised up to the faculty member. All those different pieces that go with the design. And that's what we're seeing is, what do we need to do as support services for both faculty and students as we move into the fall?
Thank you. Professor Wiseman is one of our favorites too. He's done several of our webinars, and it is something to watch. Watching him for an hour having conversation with literally 150 students on a webinar at a time. It's pretty interesting.
He probably sends me 1 to 2 feel-good moments a week, and it's like a snapshot from his LinkedIn dashboard, and he's talking, these students, he's changed lives, and through him, RIT has changed lives, and it's just, that is one of those great moments where I feel like online has a moment in our world right now. So whether you need to take something for free or at lower cost, or you're really going to have a pathway to a degree, so that, think of all the folks that are out of work right now, and really, what can we do to help get through what's happening right now? And I think online is, given, what is happening, online's a good way to actually do that safely.
I agree. Well, Thérèse, thank you so much for sharing this information. I think we have an audience of Tiger lifelong learners on the line here, so I hope that they've found this valuable as well. And I'm going to sneak in one last question. Is there any use of subtitles for those for whom English is not their first language, or computer verbal translation? Go ahead. No, go ahead.
With the edX platform, there is a translation that the transcript for every video is available, and you can put it in different spots, whatever works for you. The words themselves also serve as links. So if you want to go back to that piece in the video, you can click on the actual word and that'll get you there. Through my courses, there's different tools that people use, but the transcripts have, I feel, become very important. We do have captioning, but there's also the ability to provide, you know, the transcript from the video that can actually help a lot of people. Because going back to, is online learning right for you? We all learn different ways. So I think as online really becomes a popular tool amongst learners, the more you will see those tools become flexible and more accessible because they need to be. So hopefully some more attention will be put towards these things.
Great. And, you know, I'm gonna read this last comment because it's great and it goes back to the question of the digital divide. Robert says that we added Wi-Fi to our parking lots with free parking to enable the local elementary and high school and post-secondary students without home access be able to drive in, park, and use their computers there. And he says we purchased and loaned many laptops to the community, which is just fantastic. And I would be remiss if I didn't mention that not only did RIT as an institution go out of its way to try and ensure that all students had the connectivity and the technology that they needed, but we had hundreds of alumni and friends who donated to a COVID-19 emergency fund, including a number of our trustees, to purchase laptops and other technology needs to ensure students were able to continue with their coursework through this semester. So that just ties in well with Robert's comment. I think so many people are now coming together to try and make sure that this educational environment continues and continues to work well for everyone. So thank you all very much for joining us. Any additional questions can be emailed to ritalum@rit.edu, and we will direct your questions to Thérèse. All audience members will receive an email from us in about a week with a link to today's webinar recording. You can see a full listing of upcoming virtual events, just like today's webinar, at rit.edu/alumni/tigers-staying-home. There are quite a number of events that come up in each week, and we'd like to include you in as many as possible. You will also see the information regarding Dr. Munson's Alumni Town Hall posted there probably in the next week, so please take a look at that. Thank you all again. Please exit the webinar simply by closing your browser window and let us know what you thought through a brief survey that you are going to receive via email. Thanks, everyone. Have a wonderful week, and please stay healthy.